Good afternoon. Back for our fortnightly Monday Musing lives. This afternoon, we are going to chat about rites of passage. We're a little bit later than we normally would be. I had to drive across town. I'm a little bit flustered, so hopefully I can find my words. Just trying to see if I can invite Erin. Here she is. People joining and being able to answer questions and have people actually hear, and you can see that we can just literally chat about this stuff without any prompts, and we literally just casually chat about this stuff anyway. We don't need to just write about them or whatever. We can actually talk about them ad hoc, and we try and reference as that we can. Hello, I see you there. We're going to try and get it done in 45 minutes. We will see, because this is a big topic, but Erin has Pilates. It was one of those days, one of those really big days today. Okay, so we're going to chat about one of my favourite topics, which is rites of passage. And I think all of the work that Erin and I do really fundamentally kind of has a foundation in this topic of rites of passage and transitions and transformation. And so when all of the work that we do around menstrual cycle healing, menstrual cycle support, birth, because we both kind of, we have a history in birth work. That's how we met. That's kind of ultimately our passion, is to kind of help support, improve birth in this culture. And of course circles, and they all really stem from this idea of rite of passage. So we're going to talk a little bit about what rites of passage are, what they're not, and the differences between different types of rites of passage. It's a very, very big topic. I talk about them very in depth in my circle medicine training in Body Space Holder. We talk a bit about them in what's currently Rhythm Flow, but we'll be returning. We talk about them all the time. So this will just be a little snippet of what they are and what our wisdom is around that, but it's a lot. It's like just the tip of the iceberg. So we'll see what we can fit in. Anyway, hello. Do you have anything to add on that? Or should we just dive in? I never know where to start.
Well, so maybe we should just start with what rites of passage are. So I guess, like, essentially in a nutshell, a rite of passage is a time of like deep transformation. It's rites of passage generally revolve around some sort of initiation or an initiatory process. And it's like crossing a threshold. So once you have traversed that rite of passage, like, there's no going back. You are a different person. You're stepping into a different iteration of yourself. And there are different types of rites of passage. So the ones that we're probably most familiar with are our physical rites of passage, or our blood rites. So like for women, that's our own birth, and then our menarche, or our first period, pregnancy and birthing our own babies, and then menopause, and then our own death. And for males, that would be their own birth, puberty, potentially becoming a parent, and then potentially becoming a grandparent, and then their own death. And then within that, there also are, like, for people who don't have children, there's like birthing of products and you know, creations. We create in many ways, not just birth. But within that, I do think we need to acknowledge the fact that within our physical rites of passage, or our blood rites, or the women's mysteries, there is always a significant change in hormones and hormone levels, and those kind of bursts and shifts of hormones always give us a really big, like, a boost of energy. and or a shift or a change in energy. And it's like our bodies are given that energy to facilitate the process and to facilitate the change, the transformation, the death of the old iteration of yourself and the birth of the new iteration of yourself. So just really quickly, they were the physical ones. And then you have like cultural rites of passage, which are like graduations, weddings, divorces,
21st birthdays, communion. Like if you're religious, you would have your own, like we had, because I went to Catholic school my whole life, we had like reconciliation, then we had communion, then we had confirmation. So there's like and the cultural rites of passage differ depending on the culture as well and the religious beliefs. So they are much more fluid and kind of don't have a set like way that you move through them, whereas the blood rites and the physical rites are a bit more sort of set because they're a bit more measurable because we can biology around them. And I think that's actually what changed rites of passage a lot in our modern time, is that they've become more measurable and become more physical, that they've lost the essence of them, like the spiritual part of the actual transformation that comes from them, because we've kind of pathologized them and, you know, made them into an inconvenience. And, you know, why can't we just hurry up and like into the next phase? Because we've lost this idea of what is a liminal space. And I think whenever I talk about rites of passage, it's really important to talk about liminal spaces. And just the word liminal is just one of my favorite words, and I'm always talking about it, which is why the retreat ended up being called liminal. But a liminal space comes from the word limen, which means threshold. So it's essentially and that's why I talk a lot about threshold walking, like you've got one foot on either side and you're kind of in this in between. So that's really what it means, an in between, where you're not quite who you were, but you're not quite who you're becoming. And so you're in this in, and I like to liken it to a cocoon where you're, you know, like the caterpillar is in the cocoon waiting to come out. But we've kind of lost the sacredness of liminal space and lost the sacredness of what it means to be in that space in between and acknowledge the messiness, you know, because a caterpillar literally has to go to poo before it grows wings. It doesn't just like spout wings, it literally like dissolves and goes to nothing before it can, and it has to struggle slightly to work its way out to become what it's going to become. And that's what a liminal space is. It's messy and unpredictable, and you can't measure it and you can't hurry it, and sometimes it takes years. And it's interesting because the rites of passage, the physical rites of passage also, I've recently learned, kind of align as well with some of the astrology. So like a Saturn return really often aligns with the mother phase and with the mother. And so, and it's not just like a quick, you just cross this line and like, there you go. Like, oh, you just get married or you just have a baby and like, you're just transformed. It takes years of integration. And that's what we want to talk about, is that sort of integration. And yeah, it's like 7 years Saturn returns. It's not just a year. It's like 7 years of reintegrating into that phase. So we're going to focus mostly on women's mysteries and women's rites of passage, because we're not versed more in the men's rites of passage. But I know a little bit about some of the ideas around it. We're going to talk about those things, but yeah, we're going to specifically focus on women's rites of passage and women's mysteries and the blood rites, which is why when you hear maiden, mother, Marga, crone, or it could be wise woman or a matriarch, we used to talk more about maiden, mother, crone, but because our lifespan has increased, we've kind of got this fourth phase. And I even talk about it in like 5, because I think mother would split into 2, because we've got a different lifestyle now. So we have to kind of move with the times around these rites of passage. So that's what we're talking about when we're talking about those things. Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I guess we can start just by saying how far removed we are from honouring rites of passage in our modern world, how much we've lost the elders who are well versed in rites of passage, because it was actually often the elders of the communities who would decide when it was time for an adolescent to step into their next rite of passage. As parents, we can often be like maybe a little like too um, too connected almost, or we could be like, my child's ready for their next rite of passage, or or no, my child's definitely not ready. Whereas the grandparents and the elders of the community could step back and stand back and see more of the bigger picture and be like, they're ready now. And so they would often like walk beside, facilitate the beginnings of these rites of passage for the other members of the community. And we've just like we've lost that, which is a big fat shame. And then when it comes to our blood rights, like that was one of the patriarchy's first tools in disconnecting women from themselves, was disconnecting us from our magical, life-sustaining, bleeding bodies and infiltrating all these programs of shame and like really just disconnection, like not wanting to go within, not wanting to look at your body, not wanting to, like this whole like, oh, periods are gross and dirty and need to be hidden. And whereas, and one of our teachers, Jane Hardwick Collins, talks about the truth that one rite of passage feeds into the next. So like rites of passage always bring up programs that we're running as well, and they are potent opportunities for kind of going into the muck of these programs and seeing what's serving and what's no longer serving, and mining for the gold and killing off the stuff that we don't want or that is no longer serving us, and like alchemizing what's there into the next version of ourselves. But when we are disconnected and numbing out and covering up and shushing and keeping in the shadows, we just completely lose those opportunities. And these programs, like in psychology, it's called sequencing. So like we're humans, and the whole universe is revolved around patterns and sequences. It's just how, like, it's evolution, it's everything. And so like these patterns just keep on perpetuating, and they are huge gifts and opportunities to dissect and to look at and to use for evolution, because it's slight changes in these sequences and in these patterns that allow us like to evolve as a species, as humanity, as everything as nature, because like we are nature. We're made up of the exact same elemental beginnings as that first big bang in the universe. We've just for some reason like kind of disconnected and then tried to put ourselves above all of that. And we just like really need to like get back down and get into our bodies and honor them for the gifts that they offer, because it's when we're disconnected and shit's all out of balance that it manifests in any number of toxic and unhealthy ways, whether that's like the way we interact with others, the way we interact with ourselves, mental ill health, physical ill health. It's like it's all totally interconnected. And
we can see that in all the menstrual issues, right? And all the birth trauma and the pathologized birth that's going on everywhere. You were going to say, you said,
I don't know. I'm not
sure. So what that reminded me of actually is when we first got in, well, we first connected through birth. So we were pregnant together, and then we connected via our interesting birth experiences, and then we both became doulas. I'd become a doula, and then you wanted to become a doula, and we connected that way. I think the more we worked in birth, think this happens to a lot of doulas and a lot of birth workers. The more that we worked in birth, the more we could see the disconnection, and like, surely we can get before they get, you know, to the hospitals, pushing out their babies, trying to fight the system. Like, we can't fight the system. No woman can fight the system when she's literally there in that liminal space, in that vulnerable space where it's so sacred and she just needs to be held and witnessed. And it's being completely destroyed, basically. In many cases, that is what's happening. That's the reality of what's happening. And no one's really talking about it because of all of this shame around, you know, we can't talk about that. We can't talk about, you know, menstrual stuff. And so what we realized is actually we need to serve birth outside of birth. We actually need to go back, because what we were seeing, and I came from a background of school counseling, so I was working a lot with teenagers, and a lot when they were first kind of getting their periods, and all the shame that was getting programmed from so early, like so early, to have your body and, you know, disconnect from your body. And then like the epidemics of sort of self-harming and eating disorders and all of these things that I could see was like we were, and I wrote a blog on like being groomed for birth to become really pathologized. And what I could see clearly were these patterns of like how their own birth, so how their mother's birth experience, how grandmother's birth experience, how their menarche experience occurred, how their first sexual experience occurred, like all of those experiences all kind of built on top of one another until they got to the birth altar, and it all just played out. And it was like so eye-opening, because the truth can't hide at our rites of passage. Like, and this is why, so the two areas that you see so hidden is birth and death, because they're the two like bookends, and the truth cannot hide in those spaces. You work in those spaces, see it so clearly. And so, yeah, what we saw, like, oh, in order to serve birth better, we actually need to go back and talk about menstruation. We need to go back and talk about rites of passage and ancestral trauma around rites of passage, because that then gets carried down as well, like how your mum thought about, how your grandma thought about birth, how they were treated at their birth experiences. And something that Jane says a lot is what happens at your rite of passage becomes your rite of passage. So how you experience that, whether it's acknowledged or not acknowledged, that becomes your rite of passage. And so what we're seeing is a lot of women who get their first period, for example, and it's all like, don't talk about it, hide it, it's gross, it's horrible. And so that becomes a program for them on how to identify as a woman, or a men's, you know, as a menstruating person, like as someone who bleeds, like I just shame, you know, it's just something to be ashamed of, something to push down. And then that then flows into birth, and then that then flows into, you know, menopause, because that's what we see in menopause, like take the drugs and hide it away, and it's, you know, and same with menarche, like take the pill straight away and like hide everything to do with it. And the more we push it down, the more the more it manifests in other physical ways. So we're seeing huge epidemics, menstrual disorders and menstrual comfort and menstrual disease. And it's not, what I'm seeing in my clinic space is that it's not just from this life. It's like women are carrying in wombs the menstrual shame and the traumas of these rites of passage from many generations, through epigenetics, through, you know, all the things. So yeah, what happens at our rites of passage, whether we acknowledge them or not, becomes them, and each one builds on the next. So if we don't acknowledge them and what occurred, and actually sit with them in that liminal space and take the time to process them and see what was there for us in that messiness, if we don't unpack that, then we've got to do double the work the next time. And that's what we're seeing, right?
Truly. And like, it's as simple as, you know, like as a girl, you don't ever see your mother menstruate. You don't ever see her blood. You know something's happening because she's hiding herself in the toilet with the door shut, and then she's coming out with a tightly wrapped thing that she just puts, quickly puts into the garbage because it's yuck and gross. She doesn't teach you about how to love your body, how to feel your body, how to look at your body, how to touch your body, how to know where you know your own anatomy, right? And then when you start bleeding, that program is passed on to you. So what you're programmed with at your rite of passage is eek, welcome to womanhood. It's kind of a big fat inconvenience and not that great, and it's painful, and you just plug it up with this toxic product, and then you don't let anyone see because it's gross. Make sure you flush the toilet, because if, God forbid, if your brother goes and does a wee and there's blood in the toilet bowl, he's going to freak out, because like, women don't bleed. What, oh my God, is my mum dying? Is my sister dying? Because we're so fucking disconnected. And so, and so that's how you live your teenage years, disconnected from your body, not knowing the magic of your body. And then you come to your first sexual experience, and like, you've handed over your menstruation to the program your mother gave you and to the products that plug it up and hide it and bleach it and sanitize it and pathologize it away. That's if you're not on the pill that has stopped it altogether, or some form of hormonal contraception that actually turns off and alters 150 other mechanisms in your body, literally changes your brain. Anyway, and then you come to your next rite of passage, which is your first sexual experience, and you just hand that over as well. And you sure as shit are still disconnected from your body, because that's what you've learned. And then you become pregnant, and you're a bit like, oh, this is weird and uncomfortable. I'm not quite sure what's going on here. And then you turn up at the birth altar, and the same woman that turns up at the birth altar is the same woman that was at the altar of menarche, that was at the altar of her first sexual experience. And so it goes on and on and on. Or you birth your babies, you raise them knowing, like witnessing you bleed as a powerful, bleeding, in tune, connected woman. You teach them about the power of your own blood. When they ask to see your blood, you show them with zero shame. They watch you perform your beautiful menstrual rituals. And then if you have daughters, when they begin menstruating, you have a beautiful celebratory ceremony. And, she's like initiated into womanhood, knowing that she holds within her body like the seeds of pure life force creation magic, and that she releases from her body this like potently healing, stem cell rich, energetically vibrant, magical liquid. She knows her own anatomy. She can touch her own body with reverence. She's deeply connected. And then she gets to her first sexual experience, and she remains in her body. She remains connected. She ensures that the person who she chooses to have that experience with holds as much honor and reverence for her own body as she does. And then that's the new program, right? And then you have these women who are deeply embodied, deeply connected, sovereign beings, who know that then when they rock up at the hospital to birth their baby, if that's what they choose to do, that, like a specialist says, well, you need this, I'm telling you, you need this. She stops and she goes, actually, this is my body, and I know my body, and I don't actually think I do need that, right? And so this is how we start to slowly dismantle these toxic as fuck systems and structures that are perpetuating this disconnection, which is mirrored in everything. It's mirrored in the way we treat ourselves, the way we treat each other, the way we treat the earth. We're all just mini earths walking around, and the state that the earth is in, like, we're in a climate emergency. We're in like a disconnection emergency, basically. And what is so bloody exciting is that it starts within, and it starts with us, and we have the power to reconnect, to reprogram, and to change the story. And that truly begins with honoring our rites of passage.
Right. Yes, it does. Everything begins with honoring our rites of passage. And we talked in our last live about how this kind of all began and where all of this sort of started around the pathologization and the shame that disconnects us and how that works and why that works. But literally, you're told from the moment you step into womanhood, where you get a period or you start to grow boobs or whatever, feel ashamed, like plug it up more like a boy or a man, or, you know, like, do not ever show it. And so, and the handing over is, I would rather put toxic products that we know cause cancer and cause all kinds of issues than see my blood. Like, what is that telling young women? And so then, of course, there's going to be more disconnection and disembodiment with partners around able to speak up and say, actually, this is not what I want. And so then that then moves into the birth sphere, where it's literally, I know less than the experts around my own body. And what we can see when people reclaim their own experiences and their rites of passage is that then places like the hospital system start to become useful in the ways that they're meant to be. You know, like 10% of, slightly less than 10% of women will still need a cesarean, right? But we're seeing like 65 to 70% cesarean rates. So that is only going to shift.
It's about 37% in Australia, but in countries it's like,
and depends which hospitals, because some of the private hospitals, yeah, they're more like 65, 70%. So it depends where you're looking. But even the birth centers are like 35%. And I guess the point is that we're not saying that the hospital system isn't necessary. The medical system is still necessary, but not at the level that, right? So if you're fully embodied and you can make these experiences, these decisions from a place of embodiment, of like, I know my body, I'm here, I'm not handing my body over, I'm not trusting an external expert, we're able to work with the system a lot better. But it does start with us, and it starts with us to change those programs and to actually reclaim our own rites of passage for ourselves in order to then be examples for kids. You know, because like you said, they just need to be able to see blood. You know, we growing up, all we saw was like blue liquid on pads. We didn't even see blood on pads. We saw blue bloody liquid. So everything's, what was,
yeah, I forgot about those commercials where like it's like they pour the test tube of blue liquid onto the pad to show you, and then it's like the chick in her white leotard riding her bike and swimming because she can do all the things that you're supposed to do 24/7, 365 days a year to feed the machine.
right. And so that also feeds that idea that women, yeah, we're supposed to be on 24/7, 7 days a week, never slow down, be linear. But the whole idea that we're not linear, we are, and we actually need to honor rest. And so this is where sometimes people's rites of passage are really, really uncomfortable, and particularly hard, because there has been no ability to rest. There's been no like connection with ask help or having community. And this is where the elders, talking about the elders, their story, we learned via story. Their story medicine was everything. The older women passed down and after the younger women, the birthing women, and you know, younger. But without that, we kind of feel a bit adrift. You know, like, what is this all about? And so the easiest kind of way has, and our rites of passage over to just be these medical emergencies, that big thing that we need to hide away.
Yeah, and on that, if we are just adrift, this is males, females, everybody, like we're hardwired for rites of passage, individual and community, collective. And if we're not guided by those who have gone before us, we create our own, and they are tinted, tainted, and tinged with the collective energetic and program that's underlying them. and or that's underlying society currently at the moment. And so that's why you see these toxic rites of passage that are being created and have been created in places like the Defence Force and the Police Academy and like high level elite team sports, where it's like a rite of passage to go and do like gnarly effed up stuff that I don't even want to talk about. But this is because we, like, deep down underneath all of that, we're lost. Like, we are lost without our rites of passage. They anchor us, they keep us grounded and rooted, and they are our ultimate portals and opportunity for transformation and evolution on our soul path and on our soul journey.
Connect us not They connect us not only back with our bodies, they connect us back with the earth, and they connect us back with each other. So it comes back to that deep-seated, innate, it's not even a need, like it's primal, it's primally interwired in our system to need connection. And the connection comes from these rites of passage. That was always the point. It stamps into us sense of belonging and purpose. It gives us a belonging in a community. It gives us a sense of understanding of who we are and the expectations, which then primes us for a sense of safety and security within that experience, because what we desire is to feel like we belong and to have a purpose in a community. But we don't have that, and we don't even know who we are, and so it ends up just getting kind of stamped with trauma or with more disconnective activities. So when I think of rites of passage as well, I think of like 18th and 21st birthday parties, which is like, how smashed can you get? How smashed can you get to the point of like passing out? Like, who vomited? Like, who did stupid stuff? Like, that's our rite of passage now, is like, how much more disconnected can you get? Who slept with who and forgot? Like, it's very interesting. So, but what we're craving so much is this connection and sense of belonging and purpose. And so being aware of that, acknowledging that that's what we're wired for and what we have been programmed for, and undoing all of that is kind of, that's the work that we're here for. And it's hard work, but I'm really grateful to be in that place, because hopefully our kids and their kids don't see that disconnection as normal, and like honoring the blood and honoring rites of passage in a different way will be seen as just super normal and not weird at all. And so that's where we have really become big supporters of celebrating these rites of passage in whatever way they look. They don't have to look pretty and Instagrammable. And I think that's the biggest key. Like, it's not about what they look like, it's about how they feel, and creating this sense of connection and belonging and purpose, and reconnecting with, wow, you're having a baby. Like, how does that feel? It's probably not going to feel great to just play games and pretend that everything's okay if you're actually shit scared and you just want someone to hold your hand and tell you that everything's going to be okay, and that, you can cry and let all your fears out, which is the difference between having, say, a baby shower and a mother blessing. And the same with Menak, like young girls being able to sit down and set themselves. Like, if we had all been celebrated at 12, 13, imagine how different our adolescence would have felt, to know that we were connected, to have an opportunity to talk about, actually, I feel really scared. I feel scared about what this is going to be bleeding every month. And is that going to be an inconvenience? And how can I like make this work for me? And I want to still go swimming, but like, just being able to ask all these questions. And what we're seeing is that menarche and pregnancy are being honoured a little bit more, but we're still not seeing a lot of the menopause being honoured yet. And so it's filtering up. And death as well, talking more about death. But that's really the key. And you can reclaim your menarche as an adult. So this is something that we talk a lot about, and something that we do in all our programs. Do you want to talk about that?
Yeah. So it's not like when I first came across all of this information, I had that, like, I went through a phase of grief where I was like, wow, I've missed so many opportunities. And it was really, really important to feel that grief. And you can go back and do the healing and reprogram. And like, I've done 3 or 4 menarche reclaiming ceremonies for myself, and each one has been like more powerful than the last, and I've been able to like sink in a little bit deeper and find some more nuggets and wisdom in there. You know, like my menarche experience was like terrible, you know. Yeah, and so it's not like a damn, I'm damned, because we can, like, what's so brilliant about humans is that we truly have the capacity to reprogram and heal all the things. And you know, when we do this healing work, it's like the 7-generation principle, that we're healing 7 generations forward and 7 generations back. And we have so much opportunity, and this work is so much more powerful when it's done in community. Because as Catherine said, like, we're hardwired, we're interdependent, we're, you know, when we are witnessed, it's so much more powerful when we're witnessed by people who get it. So you've got to find your community, which is what we're all about, is like creating community. Because it's interesting, like, you know, you can look at collective rites of passage as well. So essentially, like, the pandemic that we've just traversed was or that we kind of still are traversing, was a huge collective rite of passage. And because rites of passage bring up programs and like energetic frequencies that are ready to evolve and shift and move, you can step out of it for a minute, and you can see the people who have mined that whole experience for the gold, and who have taken positives out of it, and who have been able to remain like anchored and grounded in compassion. And then you can see the people where the programming was just more subconsciously and like numbly deeper ingrained. So they went harder and faster and stronger on the division and the shame and the, you know, the putting other people down and the I'm better than you and my ego's here, you know. So you can really see like where the collective opportunities are, and where the, like, it's, yeah, it's, I find it really interesting as well to look at it in the, like, the micro and then the macro. So our like micro physical rites of passage, or the ones that happen within us, which is what I mentioned before, are hormonally driven. And like our endocrine glands, so like the beehive of our hormonal energies, align with our chakra energy system, right? So it's like our bodies are giving us this energy for transformation and for integration and for, you know, like it's a rapid opportunity for growth and expansion. And this happens on the collective as well. So like you can feel like the collective energy when it's like shit's starting to shake and stuff's kind of stirring up and it's making people a little bit edgy. And, you know, these rites of passage as well always bring up grief and fear. They're like the two kind of biggest things. Is like it shows you where you're holding fear, and it gives you the opportunity to go into that fear and say, is this fear serving me? Or is there actually, like, why am I afraid? And is that a legitimate fear? And if it is, thank you, because you're keeping me alive and you're keeping me safe. Or is that fear like a program that is ready to die? And then the grief needs to be felt and processed and alchemized so that you can move forward on your trajectory and evolve in a good way.
But for a lot of people, the fear and the grief, because we're told to be really linear, and people are afraid of grief. You don't want to feel that. That's really uncomfortable because we're told not to feel too much, don't have too many emotions. It can actually then just send you into massive trauma response, which then creates that, or facilitates that further disconnection and all of that, what you were saying about the divide and people bathing in the fear. And that's really what can happen when we aren't able to come together and create this connection. And if I recorded a podcast episode, it's in my podcast, called Grief as the Ultimate Initiator to Motherhood. And I just really believe that grief stands at the altar of every transition. Like when we're about to transform, and I think it does come from that real energy, grief stands there and is like, I'm here. And change is our nature, right? Change is our nature. As much as we want to avoid it, like we really want to avoid change because we're like scared of change. We want to like, keep going, like ahead, keep growing. But no, we have to look down. We have to like look grief in the eye. We have to alchemize it in order to transform. And so grief meets us at the threshold of every single transformation, of every single rite of passage, because we have to be able to process that grief, have that death in order to be reborn, which is what a rite of passage is. We have to be reborn, and we are reborn. We're reborn all the time, especially as women. But the other thing I wanted to say is that rites of passage are actually kind of measurable. They do actually move through very specific stages. And this is what a lot of people don't realize. And that energy that you were talking about and the chakra system, it supports us through stages. It's like, it's not just like I'm here and then I like cross over this line and then I'm here. It's like, no, we actually, so there's, when I teach rites of passage, I talk about the different stages. So one anthropologist talks about there being 3 stages, but I prefer using the 5 stages, which is like, well, Rachel Reed talks about 5 stages. So preparation, separation, the liminal, the emerging, and the reintegration. And so like post-COVID stuff, we're like in reintegration now. We're like, how do I integrate this as this new person, like this new world? And so you can see the stages really, really clearly. And sometimes they take years to actually like reintegrate or to process all of the grief. And if we don't feel the grief, you actually don't feel the grief, it's not going to integrate, not going to alchemize. And so you just get stuck in that one phase. So, and when I teach rites of passage, particularly closing ceremonies, that's kind of my advanced ceremony training. Like we talk about closings, like we've got to move through that, because otherwise you can't process all of that grief and all those fears. You were going to say something.
Like, this is why we have teenagers running the world,
right?
Like,
right.
The collective frequency of the earth at the moment is like it's like a teenage frequency, because we're not integrating, we're not honoring our rites of passage, we're not going into like the uncomfortable, hard to feel, like winter composty grief, fear side of the spectrum. We're literally plugging it up, numbing it, popping the pills, having the beer, and there is a collective shift. So that's what I have to keep coming back to, because sometimes I'm like, oh my God, we're fucking doomed. But we're not. We're truly not. Like, so many more people are like reconnecting with these sacred rites of passage, and beginning to realize how, like, what gifts they have to offer us, and B, actually just like how utterly necessary it is right now for us to reconnect and to honor our rites of passage and to bring back the reverence for them. because like honestly they're like the core of our human experience, and as like we all chose this, we all chose to be born as a human, so why not make the most of it? And we all chose to be born at this time when like this medicine of really reconnecting and bringing it back to the basics is just so needed.
I love that, Hayley. Take the elite through a closing. The thing is, they have to be willing to actually be uncomfortable and process their grief. And a lot of people are not. But what I do find is that even I've a lot of blessings and a lot of closings and a lot of circles, and especially in blessings where women will be like, I don't know how my mom's going to go. I don't know how my mother-in-law is going to go. I don't know how my auntie's going to go. They don't like talking about their feelings or whatever. You bring these women together, the oxytocin flow, the stories just, it's like they just can't, it's their primal brain just switches on and they just can't help it. And all of a sudden there's tears of joy because we don't allow, you know, negative birth experiences at a mother blessing. But, you know, and then they all come to me later and they say, I wish I'd had this. And I can't believe how healing this was for me. And I can't believe sitting in the circle and hearing these stories was so healing for my experience where I had no one and I felt so alone, isolated. It's like, this is the core of what it means to be human. We have to remember what it means to be a human. And that is stories. It is connection. It is belonging. It is rites of passage. And so when we talk about being cyclic, living cyclically, reclaiming our cycles, that is symbiotic with reclaiming rites of passage and honoring rites of passage. And it doesn't have to be some fancy, expensive, Instagrammable thing. It has to acknowledge, it actually is usually really bloody messy. And with a lot of grief, it's actually more about processing the grief and the fears so that those grief and fears don't end up becoming the drivers of your life, which is essentially what happens if you don't process your shadows. It becomes the maiden, you know, your angry teenage maiden in archetype in the driver's seat. I don't want my angry like teenage driving my life. I want like an alchemized, grounded, embodied mother slash matriarch, you know, and I call on that part of me in the future to like come help me out when I feel like I need an older woman to kind of give me some wisdom. But it starts with us. And I think the other thing is that as we do it, it becomes more normalized. And I don't find that people turn away from it and go, oh, that's weird. I find people so intrigued and so really desiring that. Like, even if they hide, even if it's a secret, it's what they truly desire. So we're doing it and doing it in our own ways. So I know we've got to wrap up because you've got to go to Pilates, but to wrap up, really what I want to say is like rites of passage are really fucking important, like really important. And there's no right way of doing them, but connection is so important, and finding ways to honor them and to create ritual and ceremony over these sacred, I want to say events, but like obviously it's not one event, it's kind of a process, and being able to actually make space to integrate the grief that shows. Like I almost can see the energy of grief, like she shows up at the threshold, like I'm here again, and here we go again. And that's why our luteal phase really is that. It's really, that's why we get grumpy and the PMS stuff, because grief shows up to be processed and alchemized and shifted to move back into the next, to go round again. And so we need those downtimes. We need that quiet time. We need that integration time in order to process all of that. And so on that note, I will say, if you want to learn more about these things, we have a couple of tickets left for the liminal embodied space holding circle medicine training retreat, which is happening in a couple of weeks. There's only a couple of tickets left. We're also rebirthing what is currently rhythm and flow, but it's being completely reborn as returning, which is going to be all about rewilding, cycles, rites of passage. We have a maiden reclaiming ceremony in there and lots of other things, but it will be lots more live I'm going to be doing lots more live connection calls. So there's a pre-registration in my bio if you're interested in that. And also my training program where you can learn how to all about these things. It starts with you. You can't be holding ceremony and rites of passage for others if you aren't doing that within yourself first. It really starts with you first. As within, so without, everything, you can't take others further than you've gone yourself. So it has to really, really begin with you. And it never ends. Like this integration and embodiment, it never ends. You can, like Erin said, do a menarche reclaiming once and then come back to it in 2 years or a year and do it again and see new things. And same with closing ceremonies and acknowledging what came out in your mother phase. At every different phase of motherhood, we go back to our birth stories and we see something new and we feel into something new. It's like, oh, that's right, that birth story taught me this about my child. So it never ends. Do you have anything to add on that?
Yeah, just there's always like, there's just so much gold. There's so much like juicy magic in the patterns and in the sequences, and it's uncomfortable and it's sometimes painful and there's grief, but like that's the fucking messy magic of being human. And if you can bring like equal amounts of play and joy and fun and lightness to it, then like that's what I'm here for. Like that's the full human experience, right? And you can only feel joy to the amount that you can feel like pain and grief. So let's just fucking feel it all
of it, and let's hold each other's hands through it, because like I'm all for like all the pain and grief and all of the joy, right? Like equal, you know, we want to hold each other's hand while we're doing not in a codependency way, but in like a, are you feeling this too? Let's just like feel it and have a good time and cry together.
Yes, totally. Like we're hardwired for community. It's life,
and that's what we do best, right? Creating community
and create our own, and there are some pretty disconnected, toxic, shitty communities out there. So if like you're finding yourself in like the periphery of those things going, oh, this doesn't feel quite right and I'm not quite sure about that, like trust yourself, and maybe they aren't your people, but you can find your people.
Yeah, and you've got to find your own way. Really, no one can tell you how to feel this. No one can tell you how to do it. No one should be ever telling you, you know, this is how you should be honoring this, or this is how you should be feeling. Be people that really honor the full spectrum of however you want to feel. And I think a lot of it will stem in your menstrual cycle, and it will your menstrual cycle will show you where the work is and what's happening there for you around your rites of passage and around your connection with your body. Will often show up in your cycle. Yeah, and there's lots of things we can do, because the other thing is then we're seeing a lot of infertility and a lot of pathology and big profit around fertility and that whole thing that's becoming a rite of passage, but it's another form of like handing over and feeling broken and feeling disconnected and feeling like you're not good enough and all of those things. So come back to your body, and yeah, that full spectrum of like acknowledging grief and equal joy and connection in spaces that make you feel supported. Yeah, and whole. Okay, we covered a lot. We did good. We covered a lot. Does anyone have any questions quickly while we're, I don't think there were any. There's lots of links in my bio about retreat and returning and learning blessings, mother blessings, circles and closings. You can come into my DM.
I was just going to say, we haven't like officially opened returning yet. We're just uploading like the last bits of content onto the learning platform because there's a lot of content. But if you like pre-register your interest at the link in either of our bios, it doesn't mean that you're like committed. But you will, when the doors open, and you'll get some special offers.
If you join the retreat as well, or my other like embodied space holder, you'll also get access to returning as well, because it's the foundation of everything. Rites of passage, cycles, seasons. magic. It's all the foundation. You've got to start there within yourself before you are offering it and holding space for others. And this is one of those big things we see a lot of people trying to do it for others, but they're not actually going within. We just can't take others. We're willing to go ourselves. So it does really start from within. And we're going to, yes, go.
I'm going to say, watch your teachers for a while before you commit to them. Like,
yeah.
Like jump into learning from any old Tom, Dick or Harry. Like, I watch my teachers for years before I commit. And so like, yeah, I just want to reiterate that, because there is a lot of disembodied, actually just like incorrect information out there. Like lately I've seen some like women's wheel cycles of the phases of the menstrual cycle and stuff, and it's like literally back the front and upside down. I'm like, whoa, man, like this is just incorrect information. So we just need to make sure that what we're sharing is deeply embodied and lived and from trusted sources.
And in integrity fully. And that's why we're showing up on these lives, really, to show that, like, on that note, to show that like AI doesn't just write content and we just put out incorrect information that AI just like wrote from. This is from us, fully embodied. We literally live this and breathe this every single day. We've been living and breathing this for many years before we actually come out and taught it, and we don't ever believe that we're finished in our learning. So there's lots we don't know, and so we're here for all of it. We're always still learning, but we just want to share what we do know and what we have lived, because that's a really important part, is like we live and breathe this literally every day, and sometimes we fuck it up because we're human as well, and that's okay. But on that note, we're also going to run another free transmission via Zoom where we're going to talk about integrity and ethics around AI and the shade of grey around this new technological advancing that we can't get away from. So how do we actually work with it so that it doesn't take over our lives and make most of the light rather than all of the dark and the fear that's coming from, which is there. We're really just going to have a conversation. We're going to talk about AI and technology, but we're also going to talk about modifications and just the impacts, and just we're literally just having a conversation about it. There's no like judgment around it. We're examining the whole lot of it, and we're going to do it on Zoom so that we've got a little bit longer. So if you want to join, I think we might do it Wednesday or Thursday night, possibly. I'm going to put a Zoom link. We just want people to kind of register, tell us you're going to come, and we'll have places to be able to ask questions. Might go for like 2 hours, who knows, I don't really know. We'll see how we go. We're just going to have a deep dive. So if you're interested in joining that call, feel free to send me a DM, but I will put a link in my bio in the next, probably tonight. Yay, because we just like to have these conversations, and it's better. I think it will give us more time on. Okay, go to Pilates. And if anyone wants to chat more, ask questions, come chat in my DMs. All right. Have a good rest of the afternoon. Bye.